The Arizona sun blazed mercilessly as I pulled my Honda Civic into the driveway of the house I'd grown up in. After 9 months at Arizona State, the familiar sight of our modest Phoenix suburb should have felt like coming home. Instead, an odd tension knotted in my stomach as I stared at the house where my father now lived with his new wife. I grabbed my duffel bag from the trunk, my mind already turning to the ritual that had sustained me through my first year of college, the quiet moments I spent with my mother's jewelry collection. Every few weeks, when the weight of missing her became unbearable, I would carefully examine each piece, remembering the stories she'd told me about our family's history. Abuela's silver cross from Mexico, the sapphire ring Dad had given her for their 10th anniversary, the delicate pearl earrings she'd worn to my high school graduation, just 3 months before the cancer took her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya, you're home! Linda's voice rang out from the front door. Saccharine, sweet as always. My stepmother appeared in a flowing sundress, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the heat. She'd married my father 2 years ago, just long enough after Mom's death to avoid scandal, but short enough to make me uncomfortable. "Hi, Linda," I forced a smile, shouldering my bag. "Where's Dad?" "Working late again. You know how he is with his projects." She stepped aside to let me enter the air-conditioned house. "I've been so excited for you to come home. I've made your favorite, well, what I think is your favorite, fish tacos." I nodded politely, though fish tacos had never been my favorite anything. Mom's pozole had been my favorite, but Linda had never bothered to learn that recipe. "Thanks. I think I'll just go settle in first." "Of course, mija." The Spanish endearment sounded wrong in her voice, like she was trying on clothes that didn't fit. I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, noting how the house felt different somehow. Not just the new throw pillows or the way Linda had rearranged the living room furniture. Something deeper, more unsettling. The hallway photos had been reorganized. Pictures of Mom were still there, but somehow less prominent, nudged aside by new images of Dad and Linda's life together. My bedroom door stood slightly ajar, and I pushed it open with growing unease. Everything looked normal at first glance. My twin bed with its faded purple comforter, my desk cluttered with art supplies I'd left behind, the bookshelf still lined with young adult novels from high school. But something was off. My dresser had been moved slightly, and the small jewelry box that sat atop it seemed different. I set down my bag and approached the dresser with trembling fingers. The jewelry box had been my mother's, carved from dark wood by my grandfather in Guadalajara decades ago. Intricate roses and vines decorated its surface, and the tiny silver key still hung from a delicate chain. I'd kept it exactly as Mom had left it, a shrine to her memory and our family's heritage. My hands shook as I lifted the lid, expecting to see the familiar velvet compartments filled with treasures. Instead, I stared into empty spaces that seemed to mock me with their barrenness. The sapphire ring was gone. Abuela's cross, gone. The pearl earrings, the gold bracelet with the tiny milagros, the opal pendant Dad had brought back from a business trip to New Mexico, all of it vanished. "No, no, no," I whispered, my voice cracking. I lifted each velvet tray, searching frantically. Only a few pieces remained. Cheap costume jewelry I'd accumulated as a teenager, worthless trinkets that held no family history or sentimental value. Panic flooded my system as I began tearing through my room. I pulled out every drawer, checked behind furniture, even got on my hands and knees to look under the bed. Maybe I'd moved them. Maybe I'd hidden them somewhere for safekeeping before leaving for college. But even as I searched, I knew the truth. I would never have touched my mother's jewelry. It lived in that box, untouched except for the precious moments when I needed to feel close to her memory. After 20 minutes of frantic searching, I stumbled downstairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dad still wasn't home, but Linda sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone with a glass of white wine in hand. "Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, Did you have you seen my mom's jewelry?" She looked up with perfectly arranged concern, her eyebrows drawing together in a way that seemed practiced. "Your mom's jewelry? No, sweetie, why?" "It's gone. All of it. The box is empty." Linda set down her phone and wine, rising to place a manicured hand on my arm. "Oh, honey, that's terrible. Are you sure you didn't move it somewhere? Maybe when you were packing for school?" "I never moved it," I said firmly. "I never even touched it except to look at it sometimes. It was all there when I left for college in August." "Well, things have been so chaotic around here. You know how your father is with his projects. Maybe he moved it for safekeeping and forgot to tell you." I stared at her, searching her face for any hint of deception, but Linda's expression remained perfectly sympathetic, her voice soft with manufactured concern. "David would never touch Mom's jewelry without asking me." "Of course not. You're absolutely right." Linda's tone shifted slightly, becoming more soothing, but also somehow condescending. "I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Why don't we wait for your father to get home? I'm sure he'll know exactly where everything is." But I could see it in her eyes, that flicker of something that didn't match her words. Relief? Calculation? I couldn't name it, but it made my skin crawl. "I need to call him," I said, pulling out my phone. "Maya, honey, he's in a client meeting. You know how he gets when we interrupt his work." Linda's hand closed gently over my phone. "Besides, I'm sure you're just overwhelmed from the drive and being back home. Why don't you have some dinner, relax a bit, and we'll sort this all out when David gets home." The reasonable tone of her voice made me doubt myself for a moment. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe there was a simple explanation. But the empty jewelry box upstairs felt like a violation, a desecration of everything I had left of my mother. I pulled my phone away from Linda's grasp. "I'm calling him." Dad's voicemail picked up after 4 rings, his familiar voice asking callers to leave a message. "Dad, it's Maya. I'm home, but there's a problem. Mom's jewelry is missing, all of it. Please call me as soon as you get this." Linda watched me with those calculating eyes, taking another sip of wine. "I'm sure everything will be fine, mija. Your father always takes care of things." But as I looked at her sitting there, so perfectly composed while my world felt like it was crumbling, I wondered if Dad taking care of things was exactly what I should be worried about. Dad finally came home at nearly 9 o'clock, his tie loosened and his usually neat hair disheveled from a long day of client meetings. I'd been pacing the living room for over an hour, while Linda had calmly prepared dinner and set the table as if nothing was wrong. "Maya!" His face lit up when he saw me, and for a moment the familiar warmth of his embrace made everything feel like it might be okay. "I got your message. Welcome home, sweetheart." "Dad, did you move Mom's jewelry?" I pulled back to study his face. "The box is completely empty." His expression shifted from joy to confusion, then to something that looked almost like irritation. "Move it? No, of course not. Maya, are you sure you didn't take some pieces to college with you? Maybe for a special occasion or something?" "I would never take Mom's jewelry to college," I said, my voice rising with frustration. "You know how important it is to me. I keep it exactly where she left it." Linda appeared in the doorway, still wearing that perfectly concerned expression. "David, I told Maya we should check your office. Maybe you moved the box during one of your organizing sprees." Dad shook his head slowly, but I caught something in his eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that he quickly masked. "I haven't touched Elena's jewelry box, Maya. Are you absolutely certain you didn't move anything?" The way he said it, with that patient tone adults use with confused children, made my stomach clench with anger. I'm 19, not 9. I know what I did and didn't do with my own mother's things. "Of course you do," Dad said quickly, but his voice carried that same condescending note. "I just meant,
Well, you've been under a lot of stress with college and finals. Sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we forget small things. Small things? I stared at him in disbelief. Dad, we're talking about Mom's sapphire ring, Abuela's cross, everything that connects me to her, to our family history. How is that small? Linda stepped forward, placing herself slightly between Dad and me. Maya, honey, no one is saying it's small. We just want to explore every possibility before we panic. Maybe you showed the pieces to a friend before you left for school, or maybe you moved them to a different room for safekeeping. I didn't move anything. The words exploded out of me, louder than I had intended. Why won't you believe me? Why are you both acting like I'm some scattered kid who can't remember what she did with her own mother's things? Dad's face hardened slightly, and I recognized the expression. It was the same look he'd worn during the worst days of Mom's illness, when he'd insisted everything would be fine, even as she wasted away in front of us. Maya, you need to calm down. Getting hysterical isn't going to help us find anything. I'm not hysterical, I said through gritted teeth. I'm upset because something precious was stolen, and instead of helping me figure out what happened, you're treating me like I'm imagining things. No one said anything about theft, Linda interjected smoothly. That's a very serious accusation. I think we should take a systematic approach. Why don't we search the house together? I'm sure the pieces are somewhere logical. She was good. I had to give her that. Her voice remained calm and reasonable while somehow making me feel like the irrational one. But there was something in her eyes that didn't match her words, a glittering satisfaction that made my skin crawl. Fine, I said. Let's search. For the next hour, we went through the house room by room. Dad and Linda made a show of looking in obvious places, closets, other jewelry boxes, even the safe where Dad kept important documents. But I could tell their hearts weren't in it. They were humoring me, going through the motions until I'd tire myself out and accept their version of reality. See, Linda said when we'd finished the fruitless search, they're not anywhere obvious. Maybe you did move them, or maybe they're still in your dorm room. I've never taken Mom's jewelry anywhere, I repeated for what felt like the 100th time. Linda, I swear on my mother's grave that I left every single piece in that box when I went to college. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw Dad flinch. He hated when anyone mentioned Mom's death directly, preferred to dance around it with euphemisms and carefully neutral language.
Maya, he said quietly, I know you're upset, but there's no need for dramatics. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. What's dramatic about wanting to know what happened to my mother's things? I demanded. Dad, some of those pieces have been in our family for generations. The cross belonged to my great-grandmother. The ring was Mom's engagement ring from her first marriage before she met you. These aren't just random pieces of jewelry, they're my heritage. Something flickered across Linda's face at the mention of Mom's first marriage, but it was gone so quickly I almost missed it. Dad rubbed his forehead, looking suddenly exhausted. Look, Maya, I'd understand you're upset, but accusing people of theft? That's not how we handle things in this family. You need to think harder about where you might have put them. Maybe check with Marcus. Didn't you visit him before you left for school? Maybe you showed him the pieces and forgot you took them with you. The suggestion was so absurd I almost laughed. Marcus, my cousin, and one of the few people who truly understood how much Mom's memory meant to me, would never have let me casually cart around her jewelry. But Dad's expression told me he genuinely believed this was a reasonable possibility. I'll call Marcus, I said finally, though I knew it was pointless. But Dad, what if I didn't misplace them? What if someone really did take them? Linda made a soft sound of distress. Maya, sweetie, who would do such a thing? It's just us here, and your father and I would never— the very idea is hurtful. She looked genuinely wounded, and for a moment I felt a stab of guilt. Maybe I was being unfair. Maybe there was an explanation I wasn't seeing. But then I remembered the empty velvet compartments, the violation of my most sacred space, and my resolve hardened. I'm going to keep looking. And if I can't find them, I'm going to figure out what really happened. Dad and Linda exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret, but it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up.
Of course, sweetheart, but please try to keep an open mind about the possibilities. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. As I headed upstairs to my empty jewelry box, I couldn't shake the feeling that Dad was right about one thing. The simplest explanation probably was the right one. I just didn't think he was going to like what that explanation turned out to be. By the time I called Marcus the next morning, I'd spent a sleepless night staring at the ceiling and fighting the urge to tear my room apart again. I'd gone through every drawer, every box, every possible hiding place twice. The jewelry was simply gone, and my family's casual dismissal of my concerns felt like a betrayal almost as sharp as the theft itself. Marcus picked up on the second ring, his voice warm with surprise. "Maya! I thought you weren't coming home until next week." I came back early, then immediately burst into tears. All the frustration and hurt I'd been holding back since yesterday came pouring out in ugly, choking sobs. "Whoa, hey, what's wrong?" Marcus's voice shifted from casual to alarmed. "Maya, talk to me. What happened?" Through my tears, I told him everything. The empty jewelry box, Dad and Linda's dismissive reactions, the humiliating house search that had turned up nothing. Marcus listened without interrupting, occasionally making soft sounds of anger or disbelief. "Those bastards," he said when I finished. "Maya, I'm so sorry. Of course you didn't misplace Thea Elena's jewelry. You've been obsessive about keeping it safe since the funeral." The validation hit me like a physical relief. Finally, someone who knew me well enough to understand that I would never, ever be careless with my mother's things. Dad thinks I took some pieces to college and forgot. He keeps saying I need to think harder about where I put them. "That's bullshit," Marcus said bluntly. "Dio David is just... He's been different since he married Linda. It's like he's so desperate to make this new family work that he can't see anything that might threaten it." I'd been thinking the same thing, but hadn't been able to put it into words. Dad had changed since marrying Linda, become more conflict avoidant, more willing to smooth over problems instead of addressing them directly. "Can you come over? I want to show you the box, and maybe we can search places I missed. I'm already getting my keys. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Marcus arrived exactly 20 minutes later, pulling his battered Honda into the driveway with barely contained fury radiating from every movement of his. At 24, he was only 5 years older than me, but he'd always felt like a protective older brother than a cousin. Mom's nephew through her sister, he'd grown up just a few neighborhoods away and had been devastated by her death. "Where are they?" he asked without preamble when I opened the front door. "Dad's at work, Linda's at her book club. We have a couple hours."
In my bedroom, Marcus examined the empty jewelry box with the careful attention he brought to his cybersecurity work. He lifted each velvet tray, checked the hidden compartments I'd already searched, even examined the lock mechanism. "This wasn't forced," he said grimly. "Whoever took the jewelry either had the key or knew exactly where you kept it." "The key was right here, on the chain," I said, pointing to the small silver key that still hung from its delicate links. "Same place Mom always kept it." Marcus's expression darkened. "So someone who had regular access to your room, who knew the jewelry's significance, and who was familiar enough with your habits to know when you'd be away for months." We looked at each other, both understanding the implications, but neither wanting to voice them. "Let's search the house more thoroughly," Marcus said. "Maybe they just moved the pieces temporarily, planning to put them back before you came home." We spent the next hour going through the house with methodical precision. Marcus checked places I wouldn't have thought to look. Inside book covers, taped to the underside of drawers, even inside the toilet tank. His thoroughness came from his work in cybersecurity, where he'd learned that people often hid things in the most unlikely places. In Linda's walk-in closet, we found something interesting. "Maya," Marcus called from behind a rack of designer dresses. "Look at this." He was examining a small jewelry organizer hanging on the back wall, filled with Linda's collection. Most of the pieces looked expensive, certainly more expensive than anything a part-time substitute teacher should be able to afford on her salary. "She has good taste," I said carefully, not sure what Marcus was getting at. "Yeah, but look at this." He pointed to an empty spot in the organizer, marked by a small indentation in the velvet. Something was here recently, something small and circular, like a ring. My breath caught.
You think she had Mom's ring in here? I think someone's been moving jewelry around, and I think we need to catch them in the act. The idea hit us both at the same time. A camera, I whispered. Marcus nodded. Hidden surveillance. If someone's been going in your room regularly, they'll do it again. We just need to catch them. But that's spying on family, I said, even as part of me thrilled at the idea of finally getting proof. Maya, Marcus said gently, your family is already being destroyed. The question is whether you're going to let it happen to you or whether you're going to fight for what's yours. I looked around Lena's closet with its expensive clothes and mysteriously missing jewelry pieces and felt something hard and cold settle in my chest. How fast can you get the camera? I asked. Marcus smiled grimly. I can pick one up this afternoon. We'll have it installed before they get home. As we headed downstairs, I felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. For the first time since discovering the empty jewelry box, I felt like I was taking action instead of just reacting. Whatever was happening in this house, whatever had happened to my mother's jewelry, I was going to find out the truth, even if that truth destroyed everything I thought I knew about my family. Marcus returned 2 hours later with a package from Best Buy and the kind of focused intensity he brought to solving complex security problems at work. I met him at the front door, my nerves jangling with a mixture of anticipation and guilt. Dad and Linda won't be back for at least an hour, I said, leading him upstairs. Linda's book club always runs long, and Dad's working on that new office complex downtown. Perfect. This won't take long. Marcus pulled a small device from the box, barely larger than a matchbox, with a tiny lens that would be nearly invisible once positioned correctly. Motion activated, connects to your phone via an app, and the battery lasts for weeks. It'll start recording the moment someone enters your room. I watched him examine my bedroom with the same methodical attention he'd used during our search. He tested different angles, holding the camera up to various spots while checking the view on his phone. Here, he said finally, positioning it behind a small planted pot on my bookshelf. Perfect view of the jewelry box and most of the room, but completely hidden unless someone knows exactly where to look. My hands trembled as I helped him adjust the plant's leaves to better conceal the device. This feels so wrong, Marcus. Like we're the ones doing something sneaky.
Maya. He turned to face me, his expression serious. Someone has been sneaking into your room for months, stealing things that belonged to your mother. You're not the one violating trust here. You're protecting yourself because the people who should be protecting you aren't doing their job. The camera setup process was surprisingly simple. Marcus downloaded an app to my phone, connected the device, and walked me through the settings. Motion detection, real-time alerts, cloud storage for the footage. Within 15 minutes, we had a fully functional surveillance system hidden in plain sight. Test it, Marcus said, stepping out into the hallway. Walk past the jewelry box. I moved across the room, and immediately my phone buzzed with an alert. The app showed a clear view of my bedroom with me clearly visible near the dresser. The image quality was better than I had expected. This is actually happening, I said, staring at the footage on my phone. We're really doing this. We're getting you answers, Marcus corrected. Now let's practice acting normal. When they get home, you can't seem suspicious or anxious. Just be upset about the missing jewelry, but not paranoid. As on cue, we heard Linda's car in the driveway. My heart rate spiked immediately. Maya, Linda called from downstairs. I'm home. How was your afternoon? Marcus and I exchanged a look. I took a deep breath and called back, Fine. Marcus came over to help me search for the jewelry. Linda's footsteps on the stairs came faster than usual. She appeared in my doorway moments later, her eyes immediately scanning the room. Oh, Marcus, how nice to see you. Any luck with the search? Unfortunately, no, Marcus said smoothly, but we're not giving up. Those pieces mean too much to Maya to just accept they're gone. Linda's smile seemed strained around the edges. Of course. I just hate seeing Maya so upset about this. I'm sure they'll turn up. I hope so, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Marcus thinks we should make a list of all the missing pieces and their approximate value, maybe for insurance purposes. Something flickered across Linda's face, so quickly I almost missed it. Fear? Calculation? Insurance. Oh, Maya,
I don't think David has the jewelry specifically listed on our homeowner's policy. It might be complicated to make a claim. Well, we should at least document what's missing, Marcus said. Why don't you write down everything you remember while it's fresh in your mind? Linda lingered in the doorway, watching us with those calculating eyes. I should let you two work. Maya, dinner will be ready in an hour. When her footsteps faded down the hallway, Marcus and I sat on my bed pretending to make a list while actually testing the camera's audio capabilities. My phone showed clear footage of us, and the sound quality was good enough to pick up our whispered conversation. "She's nervous," Marcus murmured. "Did you see how her whole body language changed when you mentioned insurance?" "I saw it," I whispered back. "But Marcus, what if we're wrong? What if there really is some innocent explanation and we're about to destroy my family over a misunderstanding?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering. "Maya, what does your gut tell you? Not your fear about family drama, not your worry about being wrong. What does your instinct say happened to your mother's jewelry?" I closed my eyes, thinking about the empty jewelry box, Linda's perfectly orchestrated concern, Dad's dismissive insistence that I must have misplaced irreplaceable family heirlooms. When I stripped away all the doubt and fear, what remained was a cold certainty that made my stomach clench. "Someone took them," I said quietly. "Someone who knew exactly what they were taking and when I'd be gone long enough not to notice immediately. Then we wait," Marcus said, "and we trust that the truth will set you free, even if it's painful." Dad came home 20 minutes later, his voice carrying up the stairs as he greeted Linda in the kitchen. I heard them talking in low tones, but couldn't make out the words. After a few minutes, Dad's footsteps climbed the stairs. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, appearing in my doorway. "Marcus, good to see you. Any progress on the great jewelry hunt?" "We've documented all the missing pieces," Marcus said, showing Dad the list we actually written. "It's pretty extensive, Uncle David, some really valuable items." Dad's face went pale as he scanned the list. "Maya, are you absolutely sure all of these pieces are missing? The sapphire ring alone was worth several $1,000s. "I'm sure, Dad." I met his eyes steadily. Every single thing on that list was in the jewelry box when I left for college. Dad ran his hand through his hair, looking suddenly older. "Maya, if these pieces are really gone, we're talking about a significant theft. We'd have to call the police, file a report." "Would that be a problem?" Marcus asked innocently. "No, of course not. It's a serious step. Once you involve law enforcement, there's no taking it back." I heard the warning in his voice, the subtle pressure to let this go and move on. But looking at that list of my mother's treasures, I felt my resolve harden. "Maybe we should give it a few more days," I said carefully. "See if they turn up on their own." Relief flooded Dad's faces. "That's very mature of you, Maya. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation." After Dad left, Marcus and I finished setting up the camera's final details. The app would send alerts directly to my phone, and I could check the live feed anytime. If someone entered my room while I was away, I'd know within seconds. "Remember," Marcus said as he prepared to leave, "act normal. Don't stare at the camera spot. Don't seem paranoid. Just go about your regular routine."
"What if nothing happens? What if whoever took the jewelry doesn't come back?" Marcus smiled grimly. "Trust me, Maya. Thieves almost always return to the scene, especially when they think they're safe." That night at dinner, I watched Linda carefully without trying to be obvious about it. She seemed perfectly normal, asking about my college classes, telling Dad about her book club's discussion of their latest selection, planning a weekend trip to Sedona they'd apparently been discussing. But when she thought no one was looking, I caught her staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not the warm concern she'd been showing since yesterday. Something sharper, more calculating. As I lay in bed that night, my phone on the nightstand with the camera app ready to alert me to any movement, I wondered if I was about to discover something that would change everything. Part of me hoped the camera would show nothing, that somehow this would all turn out to be a misunderstanding. But a larger part of me, the part that remembered my mother's stories about our family's strength and resilience, was ready for whatever truth lay ahead. I got the job at Desert Art Supply partly because I needed something to keep me busy during the summer, but mostly because I craved the normalcy of routine after the chaos of the missing jewelry. The small shop sold art supplies to local painters and crafters, and the quiet atmosphere usually helped calm my nerves. But 3 days after Marcus and I had installed the camera, my nerves were anything but calm. It was just after 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon when my phone buzzed with the motion alert. I was helping an elderly customer select watercolor brushes when the notification appeared on my lock screen. Motion detected in Maya's room. My heart started hammering immediately. Dad was at work. I'd seen him leave that morning with his architect's bag and travel mug. Linda had mentioned something about running errands, but I'd assumed she meant grocery shopping or her usual afternoon activities. "Excuse me for just a moment," I told the customer, stepping behind the counter where I could discreetly check my phone. The live feed showed Linda in my bedroom, but not the Linda I'd grown accustomed to seeing. This wasn't the slightly scattered, overly sweet stepmother who made awkward small talk over dinner. This Linda moved with purpose and confidence, like someone who had done this many times before. I watched in horror as she went directly to my bookshelf, not randomly searching, but heading straight for specific spots with the precision of someone who knew exactly where to look. She pulled out my old copy of Jane Eyre and withdrew something small and glittering from behind it. Even through the phone screen, I recognized the distinctive blue flash of my mother's sapphire ring. "Oh my God," I whispered, my hands starting to shake. Linda wasn't finished. She moved to my desk, opening the bottom drawer and reaching behind a stack of old notebooks to retrieve what looked like my grandmother's silver cross. Then to my closet, where she pushed aside winter coats to access a small box I didn't even remember owning. The customer was still examining brushes, oblivious to the personal catastrophe unfolding on my phone screen. I watched Linda methodically collect pieces of jewelry from hiding spots throughout my room, hiding spots I never knew existed because I'd never hidden anything there. She had been stealing from me for months, systematically, carefully, taking pieces and hiding them in my own room until she was ready to remove them permanently. The efficiency of her movements, the way she knew exactly where each piece was hidden, told me this wasn't impulsive theft. This was calculated, planned, ongoing. The worst moment came when Linda paused at my dresser mirror, holding my mother's pearl earrings up to her ears. She tilted her head, admiring herself, and for just a moment, she smiled. Not the manufactured sweetness she showed the family, but genuine pleasure, like she was enjoying the feel of wearing my dead mother's jewelry. I had to grip the counter to keep from dropping my phone. "Miss, are you feeling all right?" the customer asked, looking concerned. "I'm fine," I managed, though my voice came out thin and strained. Just a family emergency. Take your time with those brushes." Linda spent another 10 minutes in my room, collecting pieces from places I would never have thought to check. She moved with practiced ease, like someone who had been doing this a long time. When she finally left, carrying a small cloth bag that undoubtedly contained my mother's stolen jewelry, I realized I'd been holding my breath. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I kept replaying the footage, watching Linda's confident movements, her casual violation of my space and my mother's memory. Every time I saw her pause to admire herself wearing Mom's pearls, I felt a fresh wave of rage and betrayal. By the time my manager let me leave early, claiming I looked too pale to work effectively, I'd watched the footage at least a dozen times. Each viewing revealed new details that made the betrayal worse. The way Linda knew exactly which floorboards creaked, how she carefully repositioned items after removing the hidden jewelry, the practiced speed with which she found each hiding spot. This wasn't her first time. This wasn't even her 10th time. I called Marcus from my car in the parking lot, my hands shaking too badly to drive safely. "Marcus, what's wrong?" "I have her on camera, Marcus. She was in my room, taking jewelry from hiding spots I didn't even know existed."
Silence on the other end, then a string of creative curses that would have made my mother wash his mouth out with soap. How much did she take?
I don't know. A lot. She had this little bag and she knew exactly where everything was hidden. Marcus, she's been doing this for months, maybe since she moved in. Send me the footage, Marcus said immediately. And Maya, don't go home yet. Don't confront her alone. I'm leaving work right now. She was wearing Mom's pearls, I whispered, and suddenly I was crying. She put them on and looked at herself in the mirror like she was trying on clothes at a store. I'm going to kill her, Marcus said flatly. I'm actually going to kill her. We have to be smart about this, I said, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. We have proof now, but we need to figure out what to do with it. What we do is we call the police and have her arrested for theft. What about Dad? Marcus, this is going to destroy him. He married her because he thought it would give me a stable family again. Maya, Marcus said gently, your dad married a thief who's been systematically stealing your dead mother's jewelry. His intentions don't matter if the result is that you're being victimized in your own home. I knew he was right, but the thought of Dad's face when he learned the truth made my chest ache. He'd already lost one wife to cancer. Now he'd have to face the fact that his second wife was a criminal who'd been betraying his daughter for months. Meet me at the Starbucks on Camelback, I said finally. We need to plan this carefully. Maya, Marcus said as I was about to hang up, I'm proud of you. I know this is horrible, but you trusted your instincts, and now you have the truth. That took courage. As I drove to meet Marcus, I kept thinking about Linda's smile in the mirror, the casual way she'd handled my mother's jewelry, like it was just merchandise she was preparing to sell. Because that's exactly what it was to her. I realized my family's history, my mother's memory, my connection to our heritage, none of that mattered to Linda. To her, it was just valuable items that she could convert to cash. The question now was, what was she planning to do with that cash? And how long had she been planning to do this? I had a feeling we were about to find out. I waited until Linda was alone. Dad had left for his Thursday evening racquetball game with his college buddy. A routine so predictable I could have set my watch by it. Linda was in the kitchen, washing dishes with her usual methodical precision, humming softly to herself like she hadn't spent the afternoon stealing my dead mother's jewelry. I stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment, watching her move around the space that had once been my mother's domain. Linda had changed things gradually over the past 2 years. New curtains, different dish towels, a fancy espresso machine where Mom's simple coffee maker used to sit. But seeing her now, knowing what I knew, every change felt like an act of erasure. Linda, I said quietly. She turned with that automatic smile, the one that had fooled me for 2 years. Maya, you're home early. How was work? Interesting, I said, pulling out my phone. I got to see something I wasn't expecting. I opened the camera app and held up the screen so she could see the footage of herself in my bedroom. Linda's face went through a fascinating series of changes. Confusion, recognition, panic, and finally a cold calculation that made her look like a completely different person. I can explain, she said immediately, her voice shifting from warm to cautious. Please do, I said, keeping my tone level despite the rage boiling in my chest. Explain why you were in my room this afternoon, stealing my mother's jewelry from hiding spots I didn't even know existed. Linda set down the dish she was washing, her movements suddenly careful and deliberate. Maya, sweetie, you're misunderstanding what you saw. I wasn't stealing anything. I was checking on the pieces, making sure they were safe. Safe? I almost laughed. You were checking on jewelry by hiding it throughout my room and then removing it in a cloth bag. I was organizing them, Linda said, her voice gaining confidence as she warmed up to her lie. Some of those pieces were just scattered around your room. I thought it would be better to keep them together, maybe in a safer location. I watched her face as she spoke, marveling at how easily the lies rolled off her tongue.
This wasn't panicked improvisation. This was practiced deception from someone who'd been caught before. Where are they now, Linda? In my jewelry box temporarily. I was going to tell you when you got home, but I wanted to organize them properly first. Show me, I said simply. She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw her calculating her options. Well, I haven't finished organizing them yet. Maybe tomorrow. Show me now, I said, my voice harder. If you were just organizing them for safekeeping, show me where they are. Linda's carefully constructed mask began to slip. Maya, I don't like your tone. I was trying to help, and you're treating me like some kind of criminal. You are a criminal. You stole my mother's jewelry, and I have you on camera doing it. The transformation was startling. The sweet, slightly scattered stepmother disappeared entirely, replaced by someone cold and desperate. You had no right to put cameras in my room. That's an invasion of privacy. Your father is going to be furious when he finds out you've been spying on your own family. My family doesn't steal from me. Where's the jewelry? Linda, what did you do with my mother's things?
Linda's eyes darted around the kitchen like she was looking for an escape route. I don't have to listen to this. You're being paranoid and accusatory, and I won't stand here and be insulted by a teenager who doesn't understand how the real world works. Then let's call Dad, I said, pulling up his contact information. Let's show him the footage and see what he thinks about how the real world works. No! The word came out sharper than Linda intended. She immediately tried to soften it. I mean, there's no need to upset David with this misunderstanding. We can work this out between us. What misunderstanding? I pressed. You took jewelry that doesn't belong to you. That's theft. Linda was quiet for a long moment, and I could practically see her trying different approaches in her head. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, more vulnerable. Maya, I made a mistake. You're right. I shouldn't have moved your mother's things without asking. But I've been under so much stress lately, and I have some financial problems you don't know about. Finally, a piece of truth. What kind of financial problems? Linda's hands twisted together, a gesture that might have seemed genuine if I hadn't just watched her calmly steal from me. Gambling, she whispered. I have a gambling problem. I owe money to some very dangerous people, and I was desperate. I thought if I could just borrow against the value of a few pieces, I could pay off my debts and then replace everything before you noticed. The admission hit me like a physical blow, not because I was surprised, but because it made everything worse. This wasn't a crime of passion or a momentary lapse in judgment. Linda had been systematically robbing me to fund an addiction, all while pretending to care about my well-being. How much? I asked. How much what? How much do you owe? How much of my mother's jewelry have you already sold? Linda's face crumpled, but I wasn't sure if the tears were real or just another manipulation. I don't know exactly. Maybe 15,000? 20? I haven't been keeping good records. $20,000 worth of my family's heritage gone to feed her gambling addiction. Pieces that had been passed down through generations, sold to strangers who had no idea of their history or significance. You have 24 hours, I said, my voice deadly calm. For what? To confess to my father and figure out how you're going to pay back every penny. If you don't, I'm taking this footage to the police. Linda's tears dried up instantly, replaced by a cold fury that was probably closer to her real personality. You wouldn't dare! Do you have any idea what this would do to David? He loves me, Maya. He's happy for the first time since your mother died. Are you really going to destroy his chance at happiness because you're jealous of our relationship? The accusation was so twisted, so psychologically manipulative, that for a moment I couldn't even respond. She was trying to make me feel guilty for being the victim of her theft.
This has nothing to do with jealousy, I said finally. This is about you stealing my mother's jewelry to pay gambling debts. Those pieces were just sitting in a box. You never even wore them. At least I was putting them to use, trying to solve real problems instead of just hoarding them like some kind of shrine. The casual dismissal of my mother's memory, the reduction of my family's heritage to unused trinkets, sent a flash of pure rage through me. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of this kitchen. Get out of this house. You have 24 hours to confess to Dad, or I'm calling the police myself." Linda stared at me for a moment, and I saw her make one final calculation. "If you do this, Maya, if you destroy this family over some old jewelry, David will never forgive you. You'll lose the only parent you have left." It was a masterful threat, aimed directly at my deepest fear. But as I looked at Linda's cold, manipulative face, I realized something important. I'd rather have no family at all than one built on lies and theft. 24 hours, I repeated. Linda grabbed her purse and car keys, her movements sharp with fury. "You're making a huge mistake," she said as she headed for the door. "When David chooses me over his ungrateful daughter, don't come crying to me." The front door slammed behind me, leaving me alone in the kitchen that still smelled like the expensive perfume she wore, perfume that probably had been bought with money from selling my mother's jewelry. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, my hands shaking with adrenaline and rage. Linda was right about one thing. This was going to destroy Dad, but she was wrong about everything else. I wasn't going to lose my father because I refused to enable a thief. If anything, it was time for both of us to stop letting fear control our choices. Dad came home from racquetball at his usual time, sweaty and cheerful, calling out greetings as he dropped his gym bag by the front door. I'd been sitting at the kitchen table for 2 hours, the camera footage queued up on my laptop, rehearsing different ways to destroy my father's world. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, grabbing a bottle of water from the refrigerator. "Where's Linda? Her car's not in the driveway." "She left," I said carefully. "Dad, we need to talk." Something in my tone made him pause, the water bottle halfway to his lips. "Is everything okay? You look upset. Sit down, please." Dad sat across from me, his expression shifting from casual concern to genuine worry. "Maya, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I turned the laptop screen toward him and pressed play.
For 30 seconds, Dad watched the footage in silence. I saw the exact moment he recognized Linda's movements, the way his face went pale and his mouth fell open slightly. When Linda paused to admire herself wearing Mom's pearls, Dad made a small sound of pain, like he'd been physically struck. "Turn it off," he said quietly. "Dad," "Turn it off, Maya, please." I closed the laptop, but the damage was done. Dad sat staring at the blank screen, his hands clenched into fists on the table. "How long have you had cameras in your room?" His voice was carefully controlled, like he was working hard to keep it level. 3 days. Marcus helped me install it after you and Linda convinced me I was imagining things." Dad flinched at the reminder of how he'd dismissed my concerns. "Maya, this is a violation of privacy. You can't just spy on people in their own home." I stared at him in disbelief. "I can't spy on people? Dad, did you just watch the same footage I did? Linda stole my mother's jewelry, and you're upset about privacy violations?" "That's not what I meant," Dad said quickly. But I could see him grasping for ways to minimize what we'd both just witnessed. "There has to be an explanation. Maybe Linda was moving the pieces for safekeeping, or maybe she was cleaning." "Dad, stop." My voice came out sharper than I'd intended. "Just stop making excuses for her. Linda admitted everything when I confronted her earlier. She has a gambling addiction, and she's been stealing Mom's jewelry to pay off her debts." The words hit Dad like physical blows. He seemed to age 10 years in the span of a few seconds.
his shoulders sagging as the full implications sank in. "Gambling?" he whispered. "She says she owes around $20,000. Some of Mom's pieces have already been sold, Dad. They're gone forever." Dad buried his face in his hands, and for a moment I thought he might cry. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed but angry. "You should have come to me first, before installing cameras, before confronting Linda. We could have handled this as a family. I tried to come to you. I told you the jewelry was missing, and you made me feel crazy for even suggesting someone might have taken it. You chose to believe Linda over your own daughter. That's not fair, Maya. I was trying to keep this family together. By ignoring the truth, by letting your wife steal from me while you pretended everything was fine." Dad's face flushed red. "Linda is my wife, Maya. She's part of this family now, and families work through problems together. They don't spy on each other and set traps." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Even faced with video evidence of Linda's theft, Dad was still trying to protect her. "Where is she now?" Dad asked. "I don't know. I gave her 24 hours to confess to you yourself, or I'm going to the police." "The police?" Dad shot to his feet, his voice rising. "Maya, absolutely not. We are not involving law enforcement in a family matter. This isn't a family matter anymore, Dad. This is theft, this is fraud, this is addiction that's destroying our home." "Linda is sick," Dad said desperately. "Addiction is a disease, Maya. She needs help, not arrest." "She needs consequences," I shot back. "Dad, she's been systematically robbing me for months while pretending to care about my well-being. She turned you against me when I tried to report the theft. She's manipulated both of us." Dad paced around the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. "There has to be another way. Treatment, counseling, paying back what she owes. We can work through this." "With what money?" "Dad, she owes $20,000 to gambling creditors. Some of Mom's jewelry is already gone forever. How exactly are we supposed to work through that?" The front door opened and Linda's voice carried through the house. "David, Maya, I'm home." Dad and I looked at each other across the kitchen table. Years of trust and miscommunication hanging between us like a wall. "Please," Dad whispered, "let me talk to her first. Let me try to fix this." Linda appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face carefully composed, but her eyes wary. She looked between Dad and me, clearly trying to assess the situation. "Is everything all right? Maya looked upset when I left earlier." "Linda, I know about the gambling," Dad said quietly. The mask slipped for just a moment before Linda caught herself. "David, I can explain." "Explain what?" Dad's voice was steady but cold. "Explain why you've been stealing from my daughter? Explain why you let me think she was losing her mind when she reported her mother's jewelry missing?" Linda's eyes filled with tears that looked genuine, but I wasn't sure I could trust my judgment anymore. "David, I'm sick. I have a problem and I was ashamed to tell you. I thought I could fix it myself, pay back everything before anyone got hurt." "People already got hurt," I said firmly. "I got hurt, Dad got hurt, and our family got hurt." Linda turned to me with desperate eyes. "Maya, please. I know I made terrible mistakes, but I love your father. I love this family. Don't destroy everything we've built because I'm sick." "You destroyed it," I said firmly. "You destroyed it the first time you stole from me, and you destroyed it every day you let Dad think I was imagining things." Dad looked back and forth between us, clearly torn. I could see him wavering, his desperate desire for family harmony battling against the evidence of Linda's betrayal. "How much?" Dad asked finally. "How much what?" Linda whispered.
"How much do you owe? How much of Elena's jewelry did you sell?" Linda's face crumpled. I don't know exactly. The debts keep growing with interest, and I wasn't keeping good records of what I sold. Estimate, Dad said grimly. Maybe 25,000 in debts, and I sold maybe 10,000 worth of jewelry? I watched Dad do the math, saw him realize the scope of the financial and emotional damage. His face went ashen. Jesus Christ, Linda. Jesus Christ! I can get help, Linda said quickly. There are programs, treatment centers. I can stop gambling and get a job to pay back everything I owe. With what money? Dad asked. How are we supposed to pay $25,000 in gambling debts plus replace $10,000 worth of irreplaceable family heirlooms? The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of broken trust and impossible debts. I'm calling the police, I said finally. Maya, no, Dad said immediately. Please, give us a chance to figure this out. Dad, there's nothing to figure out. Linda committed multiple felonies. She stole from me, she lied to you, and she's put our family in financial jeopardy. This isn't something we can fix with family meetings and good intentions. Linda grabbed Dad's arm. David, please don't let her do this. I'll lose everything. My job, my reputation, maybe even my freedom. And you'll lose me too. I saw the moment Dad's face changed, the moment his fear of losing another wife overcame his obligation to protect his daughter. Maya, he said quietly, what if we got Linda into treatment immediately? What if she signed a repayment plan and agreed to counseling? What if she gets arrested for theft and fraud like any other criminal would? I countered. Dad, you're asking me to help you enable her addiction. I'm asking you to help me save my marriage. The words hung in the air between us, brutal in their honesty. Dad was choosing Linda over me, choosing his fear of loneliness over justice for his daughter. Then you've made your choice, I said, standing up from the table, and I've made mine. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I'd like to report a theft, I said, looking directly at Dad's stricken face. My stepmother has been stealing my jewelry collection for months, and I have video evidence. Dad closed his eyes, his face a mask of pain and defeat. Linda began to cry, real tears this time, tears of fear and desperation. And I felt something inside me break and heal at the same time, the terrible relief of finally choosing truth over family harmony. Detective Sarah Kim had the kind of steady, professional demeanor that immediately made me feel like my concerns would be taken seriously. After 2 days of Dad's silence and Linda's frantic attempts to negotiate some kind of family settlement, walking into the Phoenix Police Department felt like stepping into a world where facts mattered more than feelings. Ms. Rodriguez, Detective Kim said, gesturing for me to sit in her cramped office, I understand you have video evidence of theft by a family member. My stepmother, I said, pulling out my laptop. She's been stealing my mother's jewelry collection for months, and I caught her on camera. Detective Kim watched the footage with the same careful attention Marcus had shown when helping me install the camera. She paused occasionally to take notes, asking questions about the timeline and the estimated value of the stolen items. This is clear evidence of theft. The fact that it's family doesn't change the legal implications. How much are we talking about in terms of total value? I've estimated around $30,000 in stolen items. Some pieces have already been sold, according to my stepmother's confession. Detective Kim scanned the list, her eyebrows rising. These are significant amounts, Ms. Rodriguez. The sapphire ring alone would make this a Class 4 felony under Arizona law. Have you discussed this with your father? He wants to handle it as a family matter, I said carefully. He's asking me not to press charges. I understand family situations are complicated, but theft is theft, regardless of the relationship between victim and perpetrator. The state of Arizona takes these crimes seriously, especially when there's evidence of ongoing, systematic stealing. There's one more thing, I said. My stepmother mentioned she owes money to dangerous people, gambling debts. I'm worried about what might happen if those debts don't get paid. Detective Kim's expression sharpened. Do you have names? Specific threats? No, but she seemed genuinely scared when she talked about it. We'll need to investigate the gambling aspect, Detective Kim said. If your stepmother has been dealing with illegal gambling operations,
That opens up additional charges and concerns. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the police station with the case number and Detective Kim's business card. The investigation would begin immediately, starting with an interview with Linda and a search warrant for our house. I called Marcus from the parking lot. "How did it go?" he asked immediately. "They're taking it seriously. Detective Kim says the video evidence makes it a strong case." "Good. How are you feeling?" I thought about that for a moment. Scared, relieved, guilty, like I'm betraying my family but also finally protecting myself. Maya, you're not betraying anyone. You're the victim here. Remember that.
That afternoon, I met Dad for coffee at a neutral location, a Starbucks near his office, where we could talk without Linda's presence influencing the conversation. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past week, his usually neat appearance disheveled and his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "Maya," he said as I sat down across from him, "please tell me you haven't done anything irreversible." "I filed a police report," I said simply. "Detective Kim will probably want to interview you and Linda soon." Dad's face fell. "Jesus, Maya. Do you understand what you've done? Linda could go to prison. Our family will be destroyed." "Our family was already destroyed, Dad. It was destroyed the first time Linda stole from me, and you chose not to believe me." "I was trying to protect everyone," Dad said desperately. "I thought if we could handle it privately, we could get Linda help without ruining her life." "What about my life?" I asked. "Dad, she stole $30,000 worth of Mom's jewelry. Some of those pieces were irreplaceable family heirlooms. She violated my space, my trust, and my connection to Mom's memory. But you want me to protect Linda from consequences." Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. "After your mother died," he said finally, "I was so lost. I couldn't function, couldn't be the father you needed. When I met Linda, she made me feel human again. She made me believe I could have a family, could give you a stable home. By marrying a thief and an addict? I didn't know," Dad said sharply. "Maya, I had no idea about the gambling or the stealing. I thought Linda loved you, loved our family." "She might love you, Dad, but she was using me as a personal ATM to fund her addiction." Dad rubbed his forehead, looking exhausted. "The police called this morning. They want to interview Linda and get consent to search the house." "Are you going to cooperate?" "Do I have a choice?" "You always have choices, Dad. You chose to dismiss my concerns when the jewelry first went missing. You chose to believe Linda's lies over your own daughter's experience. You're choosing right now whether to support justice or enable addiction." The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I was tired of protecting Dad's feelings while my own trauma went unaddressed. "Linda's in treatment," Dad said suddenly. "I got her into an outpatient program yesterday. She's admitted she has a problem, and she's getting help." "That's good," I said, and I meant it. "But Dad, getting treatment doesn't undo the theft. It doesn't give me back Mom's jewelry or repair the trust she destroyed." "She wants to make things right, Maya. She's written up a payment plan to replace everything she sold." "With what money? You said yourself you can't afford to pay off her gambling debts." Dad's silence was answer enough. That evening, Detective Kim called to update me on the investigation. They'd executed the search warrant and found additional evidence: pawn shop receipts, gambling website records on Linda's computer, and a hidden stash of my jewelry that Linda hadn't sold yet. We recovered about $15,000 worth of items. Some pieces match your list exactly, but Ms. Martinez has admitted to selling approximately $12,000 worth of jewelry over the past 6 months. What happens now? We'll present the case to the district attorney's office. Given the evidence and the amounts involved, I expect they'll file felony theft charges. Your stepmother will have the opportunity to plead guilty or take the case to trial.
After hanging up, I sat in my car outside the coffee shop where I'd met Dad, thinking about choices and consequences. Linda had chosen to steal from me to fund her addiction. Dad had chosen to protect her instead of supporting me. I had chosen to seek justice even though it meant destroying what remained of our family. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was the one making choices, instead of just reacting to everyone else's decisions. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Proud of you. Want company tonight?" I texted back, "Yes, bring ice cream." Some choices, I reflected, were easy. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning while I was at work. Detective Kim called to inform me that Linda had turned herself in with her attorney, accepting a plea deal that included felony theft charges, mandatory addiction treatment, and full restitution for the stolen jewelry. She'll avoid jail time if she completes the treatment program and pays back everything she owes. But she'll have a felony record, and there's a permanent restraining order preventing her from entering your home. I stood in the back room of Desert Art Supply, surrounded by boxes of paintbrushes and canvas, trying to process the fact that my stepmother was now officially a convicted felon. "What about the pieces that were already sold?" I asked. "The plea agreement includes paying fair market value for anything that can't be recovered. Your stepmother will be making monthly payments for the next several years." Several years. The scope of Linda's theft was finally becoming clear. This wasn't just about the jewelry she had taken, but about the long-term financial burden she'd created for herself and for Dad. I called Marcus during my lunch break. "How are you feeling?" Which had become his standard greeting since this whole ordeal began.
Weird, I said honestly. Like I should feel more victorious or something, but mostly I just feel sad. Sad about Linda? Sad about Dad, I think. Marcus, he's lost everything. His wife is a convicted felon, his daughter won't speak to him, and he's probably going to be paying off gambling debts for years. "Maya," Marcus said gently, "your dad made his choices. You didn't force him to marry Linda, and you didn't force Linda to steal from you." That evening, Dad called for the first time since Linda's arrest. His voice sounded hollow, defeated. "Maya, can we talk?" "I'm listening." "Linda's moving out this weekend. The restraining order means she can't live in the house anymore, and honestly, I need time to figure out what I want to do about our marriage." I felt a complicated mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Linda would be out of my space permanently. Sadness that Dad's second chance at love had turned into such a disaster. "Where will she go?" "Her sister's place in Tucson, at least until she completes the treatment program." "Maya, I owe you an apology. A big one." "Dad, no, let me say this. You came to me for help when your mother's jewelry went missing, and you failed me. You chose to protect Linda instead of protecting me, and that was wrong. I'm sorry." The apology hit harder than I'd expected. I'd been angry at Dad for so long that I'd almost forgotten how much I'd missed having him on my side. "I'm sorry too," I said. "I'm sorry this whole situation blew up our family." "You didn't blow up our family, sweetheart. You protected yourself when the people who should have been protecting you failed to do their job." We talked for another hour, the longest conversation we'd had since Linda's theft was discovered. Dad told me about the financial damage. Linda's gambling debts were actually closer to $40,000, and they'd maxed out several credit cards I didn't even know existed. "I'll probably have to sell the house," Dad admitted. "Between the debts and the restitution payments, I can't afford the mortgage anymore." "Dad, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. This is the consequence of my choices, Maya. I married someone without really knowing who she was, and I ignored red flags because I was afraid of being alone." The conversation ended with Dad asking if I'd consider family counseling, not to get back together with Linda, but to rebuild our relationship and process what had happened to us. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. A week later, Marcus and I drove to the pawn shop where some of my mother's jewelry had been recovered. Tony Ricci, the owner, was a weathered man in his 60s who'd been cooperating fully with the police investigation. "Your stepmother was a regular customer," he told me as he showed us the pieces that had been held as evidence. "Always had high-quality items, always needed cash quickly. I started to get suspicious when she couldn't provide receipts or provenance for some of the more expensive pieces." Looking at my mother's jewelry laid out on the pawn shop counter felt surreal. These pieces that had lived in our family for generations, that carried stories and memories, had been reduced to merchandise with price tags. She seemed desperate toward the end. The last few times she came in, she was shaking, almost panicked. I asked if she was in some kind of trouble, but she just said she needed the money urgently. I thought about Linda's fear when she'd mentioned the gambling debts, her genuine terror at the idea of not being able to pay them off. Addiction had turned her into someone who would steal from family, but it had also made her a victim of her own compulsions. "Will we get everything back?" Marcus asked. "Most of it. A few pieces were sold before I got suspicious and started flagging them, but the police have been working with other pawn shops in the area and they've recovered more items than you might expect." Driving home with a box of recovered jewelry in my lap, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not complete. Some pieces were gone forever, and our family would never be the same. But the physical objects that connected me to my mother's memory were mostly safe, and Linda would be held accountable for what she'd done. "What now?" Marcus asked as we pulled into my driveway. "Now I figure out how to move forward," I said. "Dad and I start counseling next week. I go back to college in the fall. Linda completes her treatment and hopefully gets her life together. And you?" I thought about that as we sat in Marcus's car, the box of recovered jewelry heavy in my hands. "I think I'm stronger than I thought I was," I said finally. "I think I can handle whatever comes next." That night, I carefully returned each recovered piece to my mother's jewelry box, arranging them exactly as I remembered from childhood. Some pieces were missing, and some parts of our family's story were broken forever. But I was learning that sometimes the most important kind of strength comes from surviving betrayal and choosing to keep loving yourself enough to demand justice. The empty spaces in the jewelry box would always be there, reminders of what had been lost. But they were also reminders of what I'd fought to save. 6 months later, I stood before Judge Patricia Williams at Linda's sentencing hearing. Despite everything she'd done, I found myself advocating for treatment over imprisonment. Linda received 2 years probation, contingent on completing addiction counseling and making full restitution. Dad and I slowly rebuilt our relationship through weekly therapy sessions, learning to communicate honestly for the first time since Mom's death. Most of the jewelry was eventually recovered, though some precious pieces, including my great-grandmother's rosary, were lost forever. I returned to college with a deeper understanding of my own strength and a clearer definition of what family truly means. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.